Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today, which is around modernizing experiences in Adobe Experience Manager through Fusion. My name is Sanjay Mehta, and I'm head of industry around e-commerce for Fusion. Let's start with a poll. And the first question we'd like just to understand, and it'll actually help tune this presentation a little bit, is just to understand, are you using Adobe Search and Promote? And are you looking to replace it due to end of life? And so we have a yes or no or unsure. And I know a lot of folks use the entire Adobe stack, and some have interchangeable elements of the Adobe stack. One of the great things about it. So that's one of the first questions. Okay, we'll give you a minute to answer. Here we go. And it looks like, yeah, about half, a little more than half are not sure, but you got a bunch here, about a third of the audience that says they're going to. So yeah, thank you for your responses, and that's helpful. We'll definitely be addressing what that looks like for you today. And the next questions are around what e-commerce features are you looking to implement or improve in Adobe Experience Manager, and then select any that apply. So the first one, site search, recommendations, personalization, connected experiences, or other. Okay, and some of the things we'll talk about are all these topics, but for connected experience, we're not just talking about e-commerce, but talking about the entire customer journey through customer service as well. I'll give you a second to answer that. Okay. And here we go with the responses. It looks like a lot of folks are interested and focused on personalization, which is great. I'll definitely be hitting on that, as well as site search and recommendations. And this is great. Connected experiences, wonderful. Okay. So as our agenda for today, what we're going to go through is how does AEM and LucidWorks Fusion fit together. We're going to do a little compare and contrast so we understand the scope or sphere of responsibilities between the systems. Then we'll get into what is influencing your users around user experience. What are their expectations today, right? Pulling out or extracting what are the core elements folks see in their day-to-day lives that are things we should account for in this user experience, and how to get there through Adobe and Fusion. And then one thing we hear all the time is, where do we start and how do we prioritize? And so we'll talk about best practices or methodologies that allow you to understand and explore your opportunities or areas where you may be having some challenges, and to kind of prioritize and get into those specific areas. And finally, we'll briefly touch on how it connects. I know much of the audience is probably very technical, so just keep it high level around how the connectors work and how you end up deploying this sort of integration that we would have. So I'm going to get into contrasting AEM and Fusion, and a lot of this is really going back to if we think about Adobe Experience Manager, where it's starting as a content management platform or CMS, and LucidWorks Fusion being more on the search side and information retrieval. There's going to be inherently some overlap, and that is, I think, across the board we're seeing that quite a bit with all players in the market. But let's specifically talk about the way we think about ownership of an experience. And so with Adobe and AEM, we would consider that to be more the system of record, right? That's your content repository, your asset repository, where records are managed, curated and stored. Where LucidWorks Fusion would be the system of relevance, right? Which is basically bringing and retrieving those assets and extracting what it needs out of those assets to present to the user, right? So record and then retrieval. The next the next is the content definition and authoring. So again, more of that content editing usually would be living in AEM, whereas Fusion would process and deliver that content. So really opening up that content and analyzing what's in that content. And we're going to talk about different things around machine learning and semantic approaches of extracting information out of the content. That's a big area of the focus of Fusion, but really thinking about separating the two of creating and then using that content. You will create sites and apps, your branding, your template, essentially your look and feel in Adobe Experience Manager. You can still do some of that in Fusion, but again, for folks who don't want to bounce around, usually you would probably do that in AEM, which is more purpose-built for that, and then have Fusion populate those templates and apps using machine learning and some of the personalization, more like real-time signal-based approaches, as well as populate the various zones or cartridges, slots, whichever you may call them, in those pages. And that could also be, for example, recommenders, content recommenders, suggestions. And then finally, page and screen management for those of you, I mean, it considers apps. Like a lot of folks here have apps or consider mobile touch points as well. So page and screen management usually would occur. Really, that whole channel management would occur in AEM, where Fusion can then trigger what pages to show, kind of manage that workflow, populate that screen, populate that page. Okay. So hopefully this is clear on discerning the differences between the two. And then there is an overlap, which we'll touch on a little bit, but it was essentially we think about SEO. There are things that you're going to implement, such as meta tagging containers, for example, in your templates in Adobe Experience Manager, and then have Fusion populate those meta tag containers. You have a choice of managing your URL in either platform. What we usually see is your URL template may be defined by in Adobe or other similar platform, and then having the URL template populated by Fusion. Landing pages, for example, standard landing pages are more static landing pages that are fixed and permanent. You would do in Adobe, whereas pages can be created and dynamically generated in Fusion, for example, based on facet intersections or keywords. And cartridges do reside in both. So, I guess you have a choice to create some cartridges that are more permanent and content heavy in AEM, and then ones that are more populated dynamically with search results or other algorithms using Fusion. And then finally, experience management. There's definitely, when we think about the definition there, overlap, whether you create and build experiences in one or the other, but you have the choice to do it in both, to have an hybrid approach as well, or one or the other approach. Okay. So let's look at the functional fit. I'm going to just get a visual here, and I'm pulling up the We Retail template. That's one of the Adobe reference apps that they have. And let's start up with the navigation component, which is the menus. So again, you can define a structured menu in Adobe, or at least the structure of it, and have it populated by Fusion, LucidWorks. There is also, we were seeing a direction towards personalized dynamic menus, at least in some contexts, and that's something you can do with Fusion. So there's that approach where you kind of define that structure and then let if you bring all your navigation entities into Fusion, having that generate that and re-rank it, personalize it even based on what it's learning about the users. Digital asset management, so the banner would be created in Adobe. While you can do that in both systems, this is definitely purpose-built for all that banner management, different banners that might be registered in a repository. And then Fusion can analyze the banners either through the metadata you have or through actually using some visual recognition libraries. There's a lot of different techniques here. Commonly, we'll see labels or tags and then deliver the proper banner based on underlying user behavior or segment. Content containers. So these would be content or unstructured content data in Adobe Experience Manager, where Fusion, these would be registered in the repository there, and then Fusion can index, again, similar to what we do with banners, using the metadata or actually inspecting what's in the content and extracting topics or tokens, semantics, if you will, to present it correctly to the user. Okay, so this is a compelling capability. We'll get in a little bit more around semantic vector search as well. And one of the types of content that we can feed is unstructured content, such as articles in this case. Product carousels, again, common one for those folks here from an e-commerce perspective. Recommenders, where you'll create and define a carousel in AEM and then have Lucidworks populate that based on any number of models that we'll get into, like trending, collaborative, featured, neural network-based, which are more individual. And then finally, user-generated content. Similar to content containers you have above, user-generated content, maybe in some cases you're using a curation tool that does some labeling and tagging, which can be fed and to use and retrieve the most appropriate user-generated or community content based on signals from the user. Or you can have Fusion, in lieu of that, have Fusion analyze these with a variety of different extraction or processing tools to understand what's in this content to bring and surface the most relevant content up to the user. Okay. So that's, again, a summary of where we see, like at a particular home page here or a landing page, what the fit is. Let's talk about search. So Adobe has announced end of service for the Adobe Target Search and Promote. And what we'll talk about is using Fusion as a replacement there. And a little bit of an overview with Fusion for those of you who might not be familiar completely. While we are very well known in search and machine learning kind of based search, we do support other areas of the user experience, including browse or navigation, content, as we discussed, support and chat, for example, chatbots and conversational applications, as well as self-service, which many of you have in your web-facing touch points. We also support SEO, as I touched on, SEM, which is acquisition, customer acquisition. We also participate in your overall BI strategy by generating or helping generate insights and analytics, as well as pushing some of that to actionable outcomes like triggering. Merchandising and testing. So for those business users here, we have provide a very robust visual drag and drop based merchandising tool to allow you to create all the types of rules or scenarios you want if you want to override what the machine learning has built or suggested. And this also goes for not just product merchandising, but also content experiences and targeting. So again, I'll show some of that tooling here today. But that's very important for a lot of folks when they consider moving into another platform, is the level of business user enablement. And that's a big one. Recommendations and personalization, again, is fundamental, and we'll get into that, where you might have more of a hybrid approach, where in some cases you're going to use what Adobe has, for example, segments, and let Fusion learn how to treat that segment. Or if you want to force a certain merchandising or content experience for a segment, that's also possible through Fusion and these UIs. And then finally, search and natural language processing and all that advanced type of capability that you would expect from our company to be plugged into this Adobe experience environment. So let's talk about the search overlay. And this to start with, I'm going to call out some features. And this is one of our reference stores, which is, first of all, Semantic Search and NLP. And with that, that means looking at, for example, a query here. Here I have HP laptops, and it's going. This is just to show you more of the diagnostic, or what we call our explainable AI. What is the machine trying to do and drive suggestions? So here it's trying to match and sort of essentially predict the type of products that this user is intending on. It's trying to look at brand, and so it's extracting brand from there. at the same time, it's looking at alternative searches by looking at crowdsourced signals. What are others searching on? What are others searching on when they just use this query and click on, which is shown by the predicted results. So a lot of this is, again, pre-built, but also plug and play, which when we say plug and play, many of you might be serving different domains or industries where there might be a knowledge graph or a dictionary or a library that you want to make available to help identify these entities. So that's one of the powerful capabilities of Fusion, is to be able to have that. As we know, the sort of general ontology and dictionaries and colloquial search type of, let's call it, jargon that's used in various industries is ever changing and evolving. You want to be able to plug in that, and that's something you can do here. The next is dynamic faceting and merchandising. Here, where I'm thinking the first scenario here is where a lot of customers ask us about resequencing facets and facet values based on underlying context, such as the industry a customer belongs to, the region, it could be their behavior, right? And reprioritizing facets. So that's a big use case we're seeing out there. More is, where especially when you have a lot of facets, say more than 25 or so that you can't even represent effectively in a screen, then having that type of approach of facet prioritization using signals and context is key. With that said, business users can manipulate and move facets for a given context, like a segment or a query for that matter, or a location on the site, such as a category. And so that's a powerful capability that you'd have. Then personalized results. So here we are taking different layers, and we'll get a little bit more into personalization as we go through this presentation. But the idea that we are extracting a customer's intent through the query is key, right? Immediately when a customer searches for HP, we should know that is an important signal of their brand intent. If we know there's got a category or a type in their query, we should know that is an important signal of their intent on the category intent. So let's narrow or refine the experience accordingly in real time. And that's where the machine learning comes in. And it gets as aggressive as it needs to based on how it learns people are converting. How important is brand? How important is category? And this is important, and this is contrast to an Adobe segmentation approach, which we consider more prescriptive, where you say or target what customers are going to see for a given segment, versus based on listening to the customer's intent in real time and pivoting accordingly and extracting what they have in their queries, for example. And I'll get a little more detail on other ways we extract it, but this is fundamentally one of the important ways to enhance the experience. And then, sorry, I got to repeat here. And then search across AEM sites and content. So here, many of you may also have content or content-only sites. For example, I know there's a lot of folks across different industries here today, where some folks are coming for research or engineering or medicine and medical. And so this is important too, is make that content visible. And so here, the ability to dynamically facet content as well by analyzing it, but also in the same vein, reprioritize these facets and re-rank them based on behaviors is key, right? Especially as you narrow by concern or topic area. And then using some of the algorithmic approaches to suggest content, for example, trending searches or trending content, or personalized content, where we actually can look at what's inside the content, again, extract entities, extract tokens that are important to the user based on their searches or click-through behavior, and reprioritize or re-rank the content they see in that session or across sessions. This is an important piece too. And I think more importantly is the cross-pollination between what interactions are occurring in product, because there's nice structured attributes there, and pollinating that to content, or vice versa, what content someone looked at, and what are the attributes or artifacts in that content to borrow back into product. So it's all about refining the experience. And then through Experience Optimizer, which is the business user tool, business users can create rules. They can drag and drop or reposition content results as well, based on any rule they have or any context they have. So again, similar to what you have with product and merchandising you have with content. Let's talk about extended search capabilities, because I think these are also important for overall user experience. There's a lot of folks who are on mobile devices. I think we're seeing mobile definitely surpass search, desktop search now, especially in e-commerce. And so when we think about extended search, we think about geospatial based on location or proximity. We also think about different types of entities you return. So you're not just returning entities, but you might be in some of you might have content related around people, skills, symptoms. If I'm in medical, in this case, I'm showing a medical example where I'm looking at specialties, allergies, right? For those of you who may be in those types of industries where those are important, these are also types of searches or filters that are extended, I would consider to be considered, especially with mobile. Fitment, for those of you in more industrial and mechanical, I think compatibility-based searches, in this case, fitment is a big one, where you have a specific requirement, like make, model, year, or you're providing an actual serial or VIN, in this case for vehicle type search, to find the right products that are compatible. This is a very important use case, and again, one that requires quite a bit of scalability, as you can imagine, with all the permutations you may have. So for those of you in industrial or B2B, for example, this is particularly important. And from a personalization perspective, we think about use cases like my garage, or my shop floor in industrial, where I have a lot of equipment or vehicles that are registered to me or my business or my profile, and use those to pre-populate what products are shown or what content shown that's relevant to that. Here, another one, for those of you who have stores or omni-channel, here's an example where we're picking a particular location and searching by location and showing results by location. This is where we bring in inventory levels and enterprise data into the picture in near real time to surface the correct items. And for this particular retailer, we actually have the ability to show where it is located in the store, for example, aisle and bin. And that's particularly valuable for mobile and desktop for folks who are kind of shopping across channels. So this is one I actually personally use a lot too. And then we think about configurators. Here's another customer example where you're looking at the other way. I would call it kind of a reverse search, which is, what are all the options I can use to tailor this product? In this case, here's a compatibility. This is going to mix of compatibility and constraints, where we're showing and using search to retrieve the right options that are available to customize a product or personalize a product. This is definitely important for those of you who have those types of offerings. So let's go focus a little bit deeper in search, and I think this applies really to overall experience, is the conversion sweet spot or engagement sweet spot. And so here we have keyword and content intelligence. We have recommendations, which we'd consider more user intelligence to inform what to recommend. And we have knowledge graphs, which give us domain intelligence, right? And that's what the connection or relationship between entities and things. Here, in this case, I'll just go to another type of example, which many of us probably go through is travel, where I'm searching for hotels in Austin, and I'm going to use something where people viewed and also viewed this or may also like this based on query results. I'll use the knowledge graph to give me all the other relationships like restaurants, amenities, other things that are related to the city that I've chosen. And potential other trends, again, one we all are dealing with, but potentially are specific to that location. And then looking at profile data, which can come from a number of systems. Maybe you have a customer data platform or CRM, or in your e-commerce system or your CMS. That data can be used, for example, to maintain state between sessions and touch points to additionally augment the experience. And then we have vector search, semantic vectorized search, which is we're extracting important entities as well as tokens from here. For example, when someone uses economy, we know we're looking at treating them with someone on a budget. We're looking at city. Again, we pick the city. And then potentially additional amenities that we can extract. For example, free Wi-Fi is something that's identified as an important amenity or a factor in decisions. So this is, again, coming together to enhance the search you have. And then you may have different strategies where you might use a hybrid or approach to how you drive things like recommendations and results, which could include using recommendations to drive even your search results or help inform your search results, or vice versa, using search to help populate your recommendations. Okay. And a little more on the semantic vector search. This is definitely more of a trending technology we've been providing and been gaining a lot of adoption. And just to show a couple examples that you may or may be aware of, but one application that's compelling is definitely the zero results problem. So in this case, I don't have a match due to spelling, pretty poor spelling issue, where we have a solution called Never Null, which will find and guess the most appropriate answer based on observing users and a knowledge graph. So it will help alleviate that where you do have a zero results population problem, as well as automate. There's a great deal of automation, because imagine many of you see and observe your zero results or null queries and have to manually intervene. This would eliminate the need for that. And other use cases aside from misspelling, it may be where you have products that are out of stock and you don't show them, or vocabulary, bridging the vocabulary gap. One that's starting to gain additional traction is where you're dealing with multiple languages and connecting the two. So that's a powerful one. I'm here in California, and I think we have definitely two main languages, if not more, and that's definitely pervasive in other countries where you want the system to recognize that regardless of what region they're on. And that's, I think, a pretty exciting one. And how we do it, so if you think about traditional lexical search versus dense vector search, this is where the approach we're talking about, from the traditional approach, where we will use both still in short, where we're thinking about in short, like simple queries, single, maybe multi, two-phrase queries, you still might be using lexical search, since that's the user intent. I think about part numbers or something with a SKU number or where they know exactly what they want, and they're not describing it in more of a long tail fashion. This is where this is brought in. And then dense vectors is where you have more of a long tail approach, where a customer is describing in multiple terms and phrases to get to an answer. Browse and navigation is something we also want to highlight. And so with browse, Fusion for browse brings a bunch of different capabilities, including the ability to facet your categories or browse pages, whether they're product or content, and populate all these different elements, which I'll get into. One being facets we just talked about, that'll be driven by context, segment, and behavior. Navigation itself. So here we're showing more of a full view just to give you an idea of generative navigation, which is dynamically sorting the navigation for, in this case, a men's category based on user intent. So reprioritizing it based on the way the user is interacting. Bringing in surfacing the right content. So for browse, maybe you are curating the content that goes for browse. In this case, it could potentially be retrieved dynamically using some of the semantic extraction tools we talked about, or just a simple query where you've tagged products to have a category. And then recommendations, again, exist in categories. Whether you're recommending content, categories, or products, those are all different scenarios that could be supported. I know in many cases I see suggesting or recommending other categories at a parent category level. So that would be the use case there. And then as you saw with the Experience Optimizer and our Merchandiser, you can manipulate this experience as you wish at a category or parent-child category level. And then finally, SEO, again, is important for most folks with public-facing websites. So the ability to manage and incorporate your URL structure or map-friendly URLs, metadata. And I think one thing that's important to understand with relevance, you bring improved traffic organically, particularly because that is one of the signals, as well as fresh content, dynamic content that changes are signals that the bots use. So again, you should see an improvement there, particularly with your organic traffic growth. Recommenders, so there's a bunch of different types. In this case, we've got a product. The most typical area where you'll see recommenders, where you've got a product, you might be recommending some content and interspersed with product recommenders. And so when we think about different kinds of recommenders, we might be using things that are collaborative, like trending, or co-bought or co-viewed. We might be using things that are individualized based on that customer's individual behavior. For example, the affinities they've exhibited or propensities they've exhibited in a session. Next best is another one where we might learn what are the interactions and what are the other choices users make. Substitutions and accessories are other really big ones, especially for those who have a volatile inventory or products that are discontinued, or just showing other alternatives like downsell or upsells, cross-sells. That's a great use case for accessories and building other KPIs like average order value. And then we get into some of the deep learning techniques that you can bring in. For example, semantically similar, visually similar, where we use deep learning models like Google Vision we could plug in to then visually recommend products that have a same visual style or color or other types of visual dimensions that are similar. This is a pretty interesting one that's definitely getting a lot of traction out there, related to visual search in a way. These are things that would populate the AEM carousels, for example, product carousel. Here's a content carousel, for example, deals for you, using individualized models to suggest content based on other content you've looked at. In this case, again, this is more travel related, so based on your location, based on the theme, the type of vacation you want, golf versus beach, for example. And so this is just another area or use case to show the same capability. Let's not forget more of the bigger trend. I've seen much research talk about chat interactions going to be easily taking over, if not already, these conversational interactions taking over sort of the one-way interactions we have today. So in this case, to show a little bit of the chatbot type of capabilities, this is, for example, using any sort of chat provider like Google Dialogflow, where the system brings in, for example, prompts. In this case, I'm looking for more information on a particular concept, like a product name or a rough product name I couldn't find. So, the system will go in and find a result for the customer, where it's based, what is it intended for in this case, like it's intended for a particular gender and a cost. So when we think about answers, for example, in machine learning can learn even the questions that are most frequently asked and then the top answers that customers use or engage with. And this is what's happening here, a nice bridge or bridge between support interactions and selling interactions. And these are things you can also bring into your selling interactions, like product pages, as another content item, which I know should help definitely with SEO as well. Here we've got a different type of question around shipping. So tell me about shipping. And so here, again, the system will learn and make it easier for customers to find out what they want, rather than having to jump around the site. In this case, It can take some relevance too from the user to get the most relevant response based on their location. And so here in this case, your orders would be shipped from Salt Lake City, and to give them a little bit more of a lead time, for example. And then here in the travel example as well, helping and guide the user into their travel journey, for example, with the series of different questions we'll have here. And how does it occur? And this is important not just for conversational application, but the thing across the board is bringing in all your information silos, and vector search does a great job of then providing appropriate responses, but as well as learning the top questions for things for your prompt users. Common things we'll see integrated are CRM and customer support, e-commerce, your internet, so your employee, for example, knowledge base, any and all app interactions, whether they're internal or external, are important inputs to this. And then any chatbot, in this case, that was Dialogflow from Google, or bot, or like a workflow, and then any bot framework would do. So that's, I think, just another one where we're getting towards meeting the user expectation around conversational use cases. Experience management. So here, this is more for the business users in the room. Talk about the different types of controls you have, and I think many of the platforms today offer some form of drag and drop and contextual drag and drop. And so I think here, just to ensure that level of control, where we still take more of an AI first approach, where the machine shows you what it's done and why it did it, you can always override where you feel necessary, right? And we all understand there's going to be some percentage of manual intervention, but ideally you don't want to be creating rules all over the place. It's a recipe for a lot of challenges down the road, create scalability challenges as well. And I think we all know that resources are at a short today for sure. So having the capabilities like the AI first approach is key. But with that said, you always have the ability to control results. Here is an example where the machine learning is learning synonyms, learning head and tail, and how to match up what we call query rewriting with user signals and behaviors to optimize performance on your behalf. But you can always override and make your own judgments as you need to. And then, as we were talking a little about earlier about the overlap between experience management, you do have a choice where you may want to manage more of that experience, search experience, particular browser experience in something like LucidWorks and Fusion. So a lot of the same capabilities like creating templates, assigning zones, assigning the results that come to a zone by segment, for example, are things you can do. Again, it's up to your own workflows and what your internal employees prefer when it comes to that front, but we do give you that option. Here is the content experience optimizer. Again, this is revisiting the fact that it's not just managing product data, but content. So let's get a little bit more into stepping up really what you would have from your ML and AI game, and talk about what Fusion brings in, because our heritage has always been in information retrieval, big data, and ML and AI. That's been our core, beachhead, I guess I would call it. When we think about using our ML and AI, yes, Adobe has Sensei, and I'll talk a little bit about the nuances there. What we do particularly is we will take inputs, as I mentioned, from your sites, your content, your product. We take context into equation. For example, if someone viewed something, what time of day was it? What device were they on? Where were they coming from if we can get it? What segment do they belong to if you have it? We apply deep learning models into the equation as well. For example, looking at content and it has images in there, applying like a computer vision model to extract things like maybe a style or color in the case of apparel out of that would be something as we consider to be an input. Then we also incorporate graphs, such as knowledge graphs, which are very pervasive these days, but helping, as you saw, would help us identify sort of the relationship between things. As an output, then you've got the automated relevance, right? Using the signal-based learning where we automatically rank our results based on context, where it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach where everyone sees, the same rank of results or same results. Each user, based on their context, can see different results. Based on their personalization, their behavior, might see different results that are more attuned to what their intent is. Similarly, we can run our NLP and vector search on content, extract that on ingest when we're sourcing that content, and use that to render a more robust and rich result to users. And finally, you can deliver deep insights then to understand at a very low level, for example, at a content attribute, content token, product attribute level, what is occurring with users? How are they interacting? How are they bouncing by attribute? How are they converting by attribute, for example? How do we do it? Just to get a little bit more into content. So your content in AM will have some metadata associated to it. It may be an author, maybe a topic. It might have some keywords. If you don't have those, much of money that can actually be extracted with some deep learning techniques, like I mentioned, whether it parses it semantically by reading the content or looking at visuals that you may have. There's a number of ways that you can have at your disposal. And this is more, if we think about unstructured data, like articles, blog, community content, this is where you might lean on an approach like that. For those of you with product data and structured data, like attributes, specifications, style, color, material, we will look at that. And when a user has an event, for example, a search, a click-through, a URL, a category, we can resolve what are the underlying attributes and metadata to build essentially a user graph or affinity graph for them. And then we'll know they're interested in these topics, these specifications, these materials, whatever it may be that's underneath your data, and use that to inform the personalization. So we do take events, and these events could be signals, clickstream, it could be purchases, transactions, offline, online, and all those can be connected, for example, linked to a piece of content, linked to a product, like an order might have multiple products. We will look at what's inside that product, those attributes, to determine what is important to that user, and then take other further models like collaborative models to look at, and clustering to look at user behavior across your population as well. And if you think about AEM, the content fragment model editor, this is allowed where that metadata and assignment would come in and flow directly over to Fusion. So whether you do this manually or when you're creating content, or you have don't have this and want us to dynamically try to generate this using some ML, you have both options. But generally, we see some of this populated, like title and purpose, just for your own business users, right, as they build and generate content. Target outcomes. So what are we getting out of all this? Again, is when we talk about input data, the outputs would be relevance, personalization. Semantic vector search is very dependent on all these, and recommenders, I think, are very big ones. And at the end of the day, when we think about target outcomes or target functions, we can guide the machine learning towards certain target functions. Are we trying to push up conversion rate? Are we trying to push up AOV, or a combination of them? And let's not forget the scalability and efficiency that that brings, obviously, with the all automatic rules, for example, that are created. And then just some ideas of additional applications. As we mentioned, dynamic personalization, ranking of results, whether they're on a landing page, and this is an example I'm using, can be re-ranked by user, by context, by behavior. We talked about chatbots and the personalization that occurs there, recommenders, Type ahead, as you might have seen out there with visual suggestions and predictions as customers type to help accelerate their path to purchase. Search within, so as you get into a category or search within a result is again, a valuable capability to help refine. And then dynamic sequencing and navigation, for example, we see particularly for folks who have very large mega menus to make this experience much more usable and frictionless for customers, where they're not going through hundreds and hundreds of nodes. And as you've seen in summary, really that you still can maintain control. So insights and analytics, you always have an idea of why was a result shown, and also generating powerful insights, as I mentioned, are key, right? And we'll get a little bit more into attribution analytics, but going way beyond just your standard analytics like conversion rate and all that, but getting down to conversion by, for example, attribute and context. Orchestration is, again, the key theme of being able to orchestrate and manage the experience and journeys from search, browse, pages, personalization. Also incorporate and flow your business rules that you already have. For example, you might have created segments or other targeting rules in Adobe that you want to flow through. Those can be consumed in our product to honor those sorts of things, as well as if we think about B2B, like contractual rules as well, right? Restricting or entitling product and content. Visual capabilities to make it very no code, as you might hear out there, very user friendly approach to managing. And then at the end of the day, you still can test everything. We encourage testing as you might institute new models, or personalization particularly. It's very common to test and experiment to see the result. While there is some degree of automated testing, we suggest this approach, and that's something that's part of the platform. So let's just get a little bit into, you've seen all these capabilities, seen these platforms working together, and how, let's talk a little bit more about the drivers and, pulling from Interaction Design Foundation, organization, nonprofit that's focused on user experience, just summarizing what they consider a powerful experience to be, or valuable, useful, it's accessible, it's very usable. And this is whether it's internal or external facing. You want to consider both parties, right? Desirable, make it findable, and credible. And again, credible I consider to be also making sure you're showing precision or precise responses and answers. I like looking at, what is everyone looking at or interacting with on a day-to-day basis? Of course, Google, Facebook, YouTube are some of the top ones. There's some other interesting ones in here, as you can see. But really, these are what they're doing does influence what your user is expecting on your site. Amazon's obviously up here as well, big time, from an e-commerce perspective, Zoom and Netflix. So if we break down these into what they're really, what do they bring? I like just using this quick kind of acronym, CRISP. I may have made it up. I don't know. There might be out there. I didn't see anything. But, I think about contextual. It's relevant, right? These are all contextual based on who I am, where I'm based, what I'm doing, really tied to personalization. They're relevant, right? So I'm seeing a very relevant response to me, nothing very generic. They're very informative, right? They all are information rich, particularly Google with all the extra information linkage they have to different entities. At the end of the day, it's simple. I mean, fundamentally, Google, even Amazon, in a way, it might not be the most visually appealing experience, but they're very simple to use, right? And that's, at the end of the day, what people are looking for, particularly on mobile devices, as you can imagine. They don't want to type. They want to make it as easy and simple to use. And it has to be precise. You cannot, show a wrong response or an irrelevant response, even in e-commerce, showing something that's actually in stock when it's not in stock is a big no-no. And a lot of those types of scenarios are to consider. So when we look at, what is in common, also that folks as end consumers use they do use search and browse. They use listing and landing pages. They use recommendations and suggestions. They also see a rich diversity of content, product, unstructured videos, blogs, user-generated content, for example. So these are, I think we want to just map it to what you're doing on your own site, to sort of the key features people see and they expect and why. And what is also in common with these is they all have a profile. So taking customers' preferences, their history, connecting the experience across touch points is very key. They all offer essentially a one-to-one approach, which is understanding that individuals' unique intent and affinities. And again, we showed how that is done and getting there with your experience. It's connected, and not just across devices, but across sessions, but even across touch points in your chat, in your screens. For example, what happens in search should echo with certain recommendations and the subsequent page zones that you may have. And let's not forget fast and reliable. So performance is key in making sure things are coming in milliseconds now is a key. You get penalized again, even from an SEO perspective, if it's not. Let's hop with the priorities as we wrap up here. I hear this question all the time with customers I speak to is, where do we start? And I think fundamentally, when you even bring consultants in the room, we want to look at the business, and the best way is obviously through analytics and insights. So here, there's different types of insights and analytics that you may have available. One is funnel analytics. Where is my traffic coming from? Where is it going? Where is it ending up on my site? But also, if you can get it, where does it go? But definitely, where does it land is important. And thinking about Google traffic, does it land on your product pages? Does it land on your category pages? What is happening when it occurs? Where do they go after that on your site? Do they drop? Do they go to a competitor site, right? As much of that is important to understand as maybe a place where you intervene, because that's key, is where most of your traffic is coming. And it may not be your homepage. Visitors. Who are your visitors? So a lot of analytics share some of that demographic data or cluster data, audience data. Who are my visitors? And then who is converting and not, so you can better diagnose and maybe treat these particular segments or audiences in a better way, right, to help improve the engagement and conversion with those. So that's one thing we would look at, and you look at to help identify prioritizing even at a visitor level. Prioritizing at a contextual level, right? What circumstances are, is there underlying circumstances like regions, seasonal influences, time of day influences? It could be a number of contexts that may be impacting and that we would want to uncover and maybe treat the specific contexts that have poor performance. Engagement, something to think about too. When we say engagement, like in a website, it might be search, it might be browse, it might be recommendations, it might be content slots. Understanding which one has the most and least interaction, what is driving the most engagement, and pinpointing more of that rather than trying to change the whole page and all touch points at once. We recommend focusing on specific area engagement first and then building out there. And finally, don't forget about all your negative signals. Why are people, visitors bouncing? You understand what's in common between those bounces and abandon. What's in common with the content. The content refer, for example, and those are areas to help. Again, I'm focused on improving, but you also want to look at where you're doing well. And then mapping the benefits. So, quickly for the interested, I'm going to open all these up where we look at acquisition, and you might be focused in your business area of focus, return on ad spend, acquisition. You might be focused on conversion rate. You might be focused on revenue per session, or a combination of these. And these are just the common areas we focus or would look at as far as metrics to measure too, for a given touch point, for a given revenue per session per customer. What is the bounce rate by session, by keyword, right? Lifetime value. What's the retention rate, repurchase rate? Is the content, is the experience really valuable? You might use Net Promoter Score, some of you. There's a lot of ways to measure this, just to throw out there metrics that you're going to tie to help identify and prioritize and focus potentially on one or more KPIs, and where these KPIs are more important. AOV, like average order value, may be more subject to recommenders. And what are you measuring? Are you getting more units per order, not just the value? Are the units being at a higher price point, like average unit retail, AUR? Breaking it down that way to understand and mapping your benefits that you're going to get from instituting this change. And let's not forget about testing and measurement, and attribution's been models. This is kind of bringing the ad tech world to e-commerce, for example, where we look at what is contributing to my conversion rate, hypothetically here, showing a way to do that is through attribution modeling. What was the first touch? What was the last touch? And again, helping with your prioritization, we can understand what is most influential. If some people are viewing things, how is that impacting the end result in the whole scheme of a session, for example, or a visit? How are clicks? When someone clicks through, how is it impacting the conversion? They may be clicking but not purchasing that product. They may be viewing this product but not purchasing it, but it's influencing the end result, that it was linked to another product or on the pathway to another product. A category is a good example. A category is a great example of a click or view, but you're not buying the category, you're buying the product underneath, but you want to give it some attribution. And then direct, of course, is you presented a result, this touch point presented the result, the search presented a result versus a recommender, and that's the product that was end up purchased or clicked through. That is the direct approach. And so using these models to understand and help you understand and identify your opportunities as well as touch point is key. And finally, just to touch on deployment, and again, as we have further conversations for those who are interested in pursuing this path, we do have a connector with Adobe Experience Manager to immediately kind of get into our data ingest and prep phase, so we can basically ingest the content directly from Adobe or crawl it as well if needed. So we do support website crawls, application-generated content from Adobe, system generated, and this is not limited just Adobe, but other products you maybe are Experience Manager, but other products you're using in the AEM or Adobe ecosystem. And then we do a lot of as you see things with the data and processing and intent prediction. At the end of the day, we can present it back into Adobe if that's what you're using, or expose it as a microservice or headless service for you to consume on any touch point, app, in-store, desktop. There's an SDK there for that. So with that, that was the last slide. Thank you for your attention here. I'm going to pause just for a couple questions with that. Okay. I'm going to just keep an eye on Q&A here. Okay. So here's some frequent questions that we know come up. So, how does this compare to Sensei? So in a way, our approach is a little more deeper into content analysis and extraction versus more of a content targeting of looking at I would consider a shallow level of what content folks are looking at, what products folks are looking at, and kind of suggesting them at more of that metadata level, where we actually can go in and analyze, semantically analyze, because of our heritage and search, what's inside the content itself automatically, and then use that approach to target content back, for example. The machine learning also allows you to bring in your own different models and incorporate your different models, as well as more multi-dimensional signals versus a single signal-based approach, single-dimensional signal approach. And what I mean by that is you can incorporate your own metadata and signals like context, segments, other additional data, enrich that to improve the machine learning outcomes that you have with your data. And again, we're happy to explore and walk through more of that. And for those who are interested in pursuing that, we have been collecting data, signal data, what now, so we can work with you to get your data in your signal data repositories and extract what we need, whether it's years worth and online, offline, and let you know what we think is most significant through our own data scientists. We have a team on staff to help with that. And again, clickstream sales transactions are the most common we see, but there's other sources as well. How does this work across touch points? So here, again, we can take a customer ID and identifier, for example, or token, and reanimate experiences across touch points. That ID could be generated by you or by us, but that's a way to connect experiences across touch points, whether across sessions or, again, devices. We have a lot of customer intelligence. How do we employ it? So we do support integration of segments, audiences, affinities, CDPs. That might be something you want to pass, and it goes back to bringing even multidimensional signal data. For example, what customer, what attributes, affinities do they have, and use it into our own machine learning to create a more refined model for that user, for example. You can bring your own model. We have a bring your own model, bring your own API type approach too, as we know that this industry is ever evolving. We have a future-proof idea there. And we do support internal touch points, so we can tie this back into call center, any touch point that's consumer or employee facing. And I think that's really talks to what we call our customer experience cloud capability, where we bring in all those silos together to enrich your overall experience. So with that, thank you again for your time and attention. And I'm open for any kind of connects or reach outs if you'd like to discuss this further. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.